Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Neely. I'm a technical account manager for media and entertainment at Epic Games. So there's obviously some interest in stylization. 3 years ago, when I first did this talk with Mr. Martin Walker here, we had, I don't know, maybe 20 people. So this is kind of good. This is really good. The title of the talk being 25 Ways to Stylize Your Project in Unreal Engine, it really goes from a lot of research and things that are, I would say, that I'm passionate about. And so whether you're wanting to do this kind of stylization or not, I think it's important to get the groundwork done for whatever your passion is, whatever look or feel you want in your project, that you do the proper research and really try and make it your own. I think too many people don't actually do the groundwork properly. And so that's kind of what this talk is about. So I want to talk about design briefly. We're going to go over animation, post processes, and then static mesh materials, which represents the bulk of the work that I do and enjoy. I actually like it, the best part of it. Design is pretty much key. It's everything. Research, aesthetic, cohesion, all that stuff is important. If you don't have that, then you might be spinning your wheels or whatever. And it's easy to get a bunch of kit bash things together and you bring them all into the engine and you're like, okay, everything doesn't look like I made it, or it doesn't look like somebody, the same person made it or whatever. And that's okay. But all of that can be changed and tweaked, and you just have to find what those things are. Research is how you do that. What kind of aesthetic do you want? Look at what other people have done, what has been done before. Without it, you might be wasting a lot of time. Aesthetic. Once you have your aesthetic, and you know what you want to do, and it's like, I'm going this direction and nothing can stop me, then make it in everything that you have. Your color palettes, your character, your props, your modeling, everything that you're putting in your project. Try and make it like it looks or comes from the same world. Characters need to look like they come from the world that they're in. And cohesion, lighting, and one thing that's left behind so much, audio. People don't think about audio till the end of something. Audio is really important and can help facilitate and be that glue, just like your lighting or your color palette can help be that glue to sort of bring it all together. So animation is another way to stylize your project. And we all know that stylized animation has a lot of interesting things. You got squash and stretch. You've got, there's a lot of ways that people like to animate. And the more funky the character, the more interesting that can be. So I want to talk about ways to get more traditional looks, like stepped looks. And so Control Rig and Sequencer has some really good functionality now, especially even before 5.6, but even now we've gotten so much good stuff into the engine. Time Warp Curve is my favorite new tool, aside from some other tools that came out this week. But anyway, the Time Warp Curve gives you the ability to, when you put it in the sequencer, it gives you this timeline. And the timeline represents 1-to-1 from the beginning of your track or your shot to the end. So you can select that and bake it. And so once you bake it, you can say, I'm going to bake it on 4s or I'm going to bake it on 3s. And then it creates this huge stepped, well, you have to set the stepping to constant instead of linear like the slide shows. But that means it's going to hold whatever animation's happening on that frame for those next 3 frames. And then it's going to skip 3 frames ahead and hold that. And it's a non-destructive way to get stylized stepped animation. And you can put different steps on all sorts of things. And when I say non-destructive, what I mean is it's better than just baking out your character animation and then having to go back and maybe do something to get it back if you wanted to change it. This way you can change it to multiple steps, decide what's best for your project, and move on. Oh, there we go. She's animated on 3s. So it just gives you an idea of that sort of steppy look that you can get. Deformers. Deformers are relatively new in the engine, and I love deformers because they give you real funky results. And you can do a lot of things just as if you would in a regular 2D animation. You can do some squash, some stretch. It's kind of fun. In physics, local chain dynamics is really one of my favorite things about control rig, because you can say, I have 12 bones, here's the first bone, here's the last bone, and it will take care of the rest. And when I say the rest, and you get all that for free. So then you could bake out that animation, put a time warp curve in, and then you get it on stepped threes. So it's quite an interesting feature. So as we get into materials and the looks, and that's really sort of the pressing point of this talk, what we're looking at are several different things. And I've gone through these processes. Most of this that I'm listing here under the post-process volume, these materials are available in a shader pack on the marketplace. And I plan to update it. I just haven't since I first made it. And if you've gotten those, it gives you a good understanding about where my journey into this exploration has gone. So one of the first things that I did is I took some HLSL and I said, okay, I want to determine the value of every pixel. And I want to say, all right, if it's above or in this range, make it black. If it's in this range, I did 6 colors. It's like, okay, now we have 6 color posterization. It looks good, it looks okay. It's very poster graphic in nature. Renders pretty good at a ultra high res, but it still wasn't 100% for me. So I started playing around with, instead of color, let's do some textures. So I did some halftones. And then I did some line screens. The line screens were cool. Something happened there I didn't expect, in that they started to, because of how I created them, they dovetail into each other just like a good graphic, element. Old line screens, you used to have to put them in by hand, but anyway. Then I said, okay, what about sketches? And so I took a sketchbook and I sketched out 6 gradients at different levels, and then I shot them with my phone, got them in here, and put them into it's the same base shader that's doing all of this. I did it with stippling. I thought that was fun. I did a lot of this back in the day, and I was like, how would this look? And I can vary the dot size and whatnot. But one problem with post-process volumes is you swim through the texture. It stays screen space, and no matter what's happening, it stays there and you can see it, and it really breaks it for me. So it breaks the experience of what you're trying to do, and it doesn't look like it's integrated with the scene. So I think, yeah. So what I did is I started rotating the images. I used a rotator and a bit of a modulo, and I can say, rotate this fast and this many degrees all the time. And so it sort of in some ways mitigated that issue. And it was okay, but still I wanted to get these textures onto something. Post-process does pretty well. The only thing that's on here, technically, that I'm doing as post-process is just the halftone. And the halftone's picking up the screen color and sort of fading out and whatnot. It just gives it a look. There's nothing super special about it. The Quinn and the board, we'll talk about that in a bit. And then pixelization, if you needed a screen or some kind of a digital robot vision, I don't know, whatever you want, is you can go in and there's a few nodes, you just hook them up and scale them. You can come by the booth and talk to me about any of this. I'm happy to show you what all these textures that I've made do and how they work, all these materials. But the pixel resolution can be altered, and you can also say I want this many colors, I want this many pixels wide and tall, and then the grid is added because it's actually a node. So static mesh materials, this is my passion because it really does take me to the level that I wanted to get in stylization, and for that there was a progression. And so the obvious first thing to do is get an ink line. Post-process does a really good job of Sobel operations and fine lines around things, but if you try to scale them or make them super thick, it starts to not look as good. And so by committing that to the mesh itself, I can do a lot of things. So this is basically how that particular material is created. It's a very simple setup, but you're going to see this same setup in all of the materials that I've done. I use this technique everywhere. Static mesh materials are great, ink lines are great, but I wanted that hand-drawn look. And so I took those same scratches that I made for the post-process and I piped them into here. And what this does, it gives me the ability, I can rotate them and whatnot. I can make them more intense or less intense. And I'm using a bit of a Fresnel function to sort of make them go away from the middle out to the edges, so you just get scratchy on the edges and that kind of thing. It's actually quite satisfying. Still, building on some of the same concepts that I had before. And the graph, this Fresnel effect, I don't know if I have in fact, I don't have a sharper one. It's down here in this lower right-hand corner. Camera vector and the dot product with the pixel normal world space, that takes it and says, okay, from the edge, I'm just gonna look at this mesh from the edge. And that's how the black lines stay on the edge. That's how my scratches, I can dissolve them from the middle because the Fresnel effect does that. So it's quite satisfying. I keep using that. My 9-year-old says that all the time. So the next step was, okay, I wanted to get the textures and I put the pointillism. Okay, just like the scratches, I finally got it on the mesh. It's working great. In fact, it actually, you can substitute any image. It doesn't just have to be scratches or dots or whatever. You can just go in and do it yourself, whatever you want, your own paintings or whatever. So the other thing that people, ask me, what about banding? Can you do banding? I want some flat color. I want it to not look so shaded. And so to do that, I added some banding, and you use a color atlas, a color curve atlas. And going through this process was quite educational, I'll say that, because adding 3 colors to a color atlas, a curve, and then saying, okay, now what do I do with that? Well, technically, you have to do a little bit of math, multiply it out, and then pipe it into some other sections. I'm going to show you all of this, and like I said, I can show you at the booth as well. But for the most part, leveraging the sky atmosphere light direction gives me the ability to change the lighting. I don't have to really do anything. Before, I wrote a blueprint to do this, and I felt like that was way too much work. It really should be more natural. And then there's actually a node that handles it, and it's the sky atmosphere light direction node. That's gold, and it really gives you a lot of abilities, especially when you're trying to band and you're trying to get shadows or things to go in a particular direction. The other thing it does, it allows for it if I go back, these 2 textures, one is line screens and one is halftones. So that's the second half that we're looking at right here. And you can see the transition between the bands has either dots or lines, and I've got a linear interpolation node in between the 2, so I can make it one or the other or a blend of the 2, which is really nice. Rim lighting is a little different, so I'm leveraging both the Fresnel effect and the directional light. And what I do is I actually subtract the Fresnel from the middle of the rim lights. Otherwise, it would just be yellow / purple on the whole thing. So by taking it out and doing a little bit of subtraction, I can take it out of there and then add it back into the final result. This is kind of how that transpires. It's not scary. I promise it's not scary. And you can see there's a few things in here that I did in the very first material graph that I showed you. And so it's just, I prefer clean blueprints. I don't know about anybody else in the room, but if I can't understand it by looking at it, it terrifies me. So another way you can stylize, and this is very interesting. I want to dive deeper with the Odyssey tool set, because painted normals are really cool for getting that oil painted surface and just something that's a little more unnatural or unreal. It's a very, very cool look. Now the flipbook textures, the scratches that I had moving in the post-process and the stippling by using that rotate, I'm like, how do I do that on my static mesh? So I decided to use a flipbook, and I created all 12 panels or 16 panels of all these different scratches. I just drew them out, and the result was actually not too bad. So it looks pretty good, and then you can dial in. You can make these scratches whatever color you want. You can make them more translucent. And that's the graph for that bit of business. So going into the flipbook, taking the textures into the flipbook, and you can dictate the speed, because I'm multiplying by time to get the animation. And then again, this power node, subtract, multiply, it's a habit now. I do it everywhere. So there was another thing that I've discovered in the last year, and that is static mesh objects have an overlay material slot. I did not know what this was about. I'd never, thrown a material in there to see. It's actually super powerful, and it's very, very interesting. And so what it allows for and what it does is your mesh renders the first time with the original material set. The overlay material comes back, re-renders the mesh with whatever that material does, and then it composites the two back together. With translucency, you can get some pretty interesting looks. Let me see if this will, there we go. So the normals for that material, or the UVs, are different than the original material that is giving her her color. The hologram is doing something completely different. Don't panic. So the noise here is strictly just giving me that screen noise that the holograph has, or the hologram has. And as you can tell at the top of the material, there's the traditional bit I have going for the Fresnel effect. The one thing that's really quite different on this one is that bounding box 0 to 1 UV. That's what gets the lines traveling up her body and not sticking to the UVs that the mesh has. So it just kind of turned out to be a nice little technique. So I went crazy with the overlay material a little bit, and it led me down some really interesting ways. So this is my term, glitchy material, and it leverages refraction and flipbooks to get this weird ripping apart of the edges of this model. And I love the result of how this has turned out, because all of this animates. and for me, that I'm just like, okay, what do we do next? You know, and so just working at it slowly. Again, don't panic. But there's the 2 flip books, and they're fed in. And then there's timing. And that's part of the trick as well. I have a different speed parameter for each of the flip books. So they don't always land at the same time on the same place. And that way you always have variety. You always have something that's unpredictable. If I wanted them to land in the right place, I might use a material parameter collection or something and pipe that in and then put that into the timeline of the sequencer so that it would change exactly how I want it to. If you want to scan some codes, I brought some codes. Thank you.